Peru News Today. All you need to know about Peru.
Giuliana Llamoja, the young woman who stabbed her mother more than 60 times. The murder committed by Giuliana Llamoja on March 5, 2005 shocked Peru. Maria del Carmen Hilaires Martinez received more than 60 stab wounds from her daughter, an 18-year-old law student. She had wanted to poison her, but in the end she decided to kill her with a knife. Her name would be covered in the following days in different newspapers and news programs. Giuliana Llamoja, the matricide who had committed the crime with violence and hatred against her mother in the house on Las Magnolias Street in the district of San Juan de Miraflores. The rebellious girl, who many friends and family said needed to be patient, had led to the death of the woman who gave her life. "I killed her. I killed her," she shouted at her brother Luis with the blood on her hands. Her mother was lying on the floor without moving, while her father, Judge Luis Llamoja, received the news in a bed in a hotel in Buenos Aires where he was following a refresher course. The relationship between Giuliana and Maria del Carmen was bad, tense. They never got along well, recalled some acquaintances close to the family who had regretted not doing anything sooner, perhaps taking her to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but the homicide was already accomplished. The young woman reported that her fights with her mother were constant and for any reason, her outings with her friends, her way of dressing or putting on makeup. "My mother was very explosive, everything seemed wrong to her. We always argued over something stupid. I don't remember what the reason was, but, on one occasion, she got upset. She went to my room and she broke all my things, my perfumes, my clothes," she said between sobs. "The last argument started over a mirror," Giuliana said. "I was pretty, flirtatious as I am, trying on a new dress in the living room, for which she had taken out the bathroom mirror," said the young woman. "Then my mom arrived and she started yelling at me for taking the mirror out of the bathroom. I left her talking and went to the kitchen, but she continued yelling at me and insulting me that she was a bad daughter. In the kitchen I saw a knife, I grabbed it and stuck it on the table saying stop insulting me. Then, she grabbed 2 knives and threw them at me. One crashed into the wall and broke the handle, the other fell to the floor and also broke. I hit her with the handle part of the knife I had. We struggled, crashed into the wall, and with her back turned, she turned off the light switch. He tried to attack me, but I defended myself. Then, she stopped moving and fell to the floor," said Llamoja, who, after committing the crime, never called the police or asked for help for her mother. Giuliana confessed to the police that the victim, who worked as a secretary in a military unit, had found an envelope of rodenticide and thought that her daughter had tried to poison her. She wasn't wrong. The law student had been planning this murder, but she regretted it. After this, the young woman dragged the body of her parent to hide it in the bathroom and, in this way, erased the evidence of her crime. According to Luis Llamoja Hilaires, the matricide's brother, he arrived at the house at approximately 11 p.m. and he could not enter through the front door because it was locked. He also highlighted that she never confessed the fact to him, since, as it was very late, he himself realized that her mother was not there, so he felt worried. When he approached the bathroom, he saw the inert body of her mother through the skylight and asked the neighbors for help. Finally, thanks to his help, he was able to open the door. But there is also another version. A reported person pointed out that Giuliana had insulted her mother by shouting at her as an ignorant person and reproached her for not having a university education like her or her father, and that was where she would have started it all. Only she knows the only truth. With the criminal courtroom full of photographers, journalists and the family of Giuliana Llamoja, the trial began against this young woman who had once won a dance contest on television and who was now in front of a judge to determine her sentence for murdering his mother. The matricide defended herself by indicating that she considered her parent to be good, but usually when she was angry, she would go against her. "He told me a prostitute, you don't have a lover? I have your father," she said. Giuliana did not stop crying during the trial. She said that her mother tried to attack her first, that the light had gone out when she had tried to disarm her, and that she had responded to her alleged attack. The young woman, who some time ago had won a dance contest on television and was an outstanding student, had to be prosecuted for the murder of her mother. During the trial, she did not stop crying and she stated that her attacks against Maria del Carmen Hilaires were in her own defense. "I'm not a monster. I don't have a sinister mind. At that moment I didn't feel like she was my mother, she was just a black spot that was rushing at me and I wanted to stop her from hurting me, she said. When she turned on the light she found the corpse of her mother. She didn't move, he had killed her. She took a bath because she felt disgusting, but she never asked anyone for help. He contradicted himself in some versions. He stated that he had not tried to murder his mother with the rodenticide, he had only bought it out of curiosity. He wanted to see what color this poison took with the soda once diluted, or when faced with difficult questions about the crime he only answered that everything had become cloudy. She answered the same thing when she was asked to explain why she put all the knives in the house in a bag and threw them in the garden. Giuliana also accused her Aunt Carmen Rosa of being a bad influence on the victim. The murderer's defense asked the prosecutor's office to prosecute Maria del Carmen's sister for instigating the crime of injuries because she had supposedly incited the mother and daughter to be in constant fights, although this request was unsuccessful. The psychiatric reports clarified the personality of the murderer. She suffers from the Electra complex, emotional fixation on her father, and she demonstrates a histrionic personality. At the time of the sentence reading, Giuliana was crying, 20 years in prison. She also had to pay civil compensation of 30,000 new sols in favor of her mother's relatives. Before leaving the room she said goodbye to her 12-year-old brother Luis, that close relative who would never speak to her again in her life. Giuliana Llamoja had her sentence reduced from 20 to 12 years that the Court of Lima had initially imposed. The members had considered that the young woman's repentance had been sincere as a mitigating factor to reduce the penalty. They took into account that at the time the murder occurred she was 18 years old, so the law somewhat minimized her crimes. The murderer was held in the Chorlos women's prison. In 2009, after serving 4 years in prison, a third of the 12-year sentence, the woman was released with semi-freedom. No one came to pick her up and the release procedures were carried out by the director of the prison. This was restricted to some established rules of conduct, such as that he could not change his address without prior notice from the court, he had to continue with his psychological therapy, prove his work occupation every 3 months, appear in court every 30 days in order to justify his activities, labor and educational, and was prevented from leaving the country. However, in 2012 she did not comply with some of the aforementioned restrictions and she became a fugitive from justice. There was this rumor that she had escaped to Ecuador. Her father, like her from the first moment, continued to support her, but her brother Luis expected her to remain in prison until her last days and regretted that she had not taken advantage of the benefit of her freedom. The young woman had disappeared and her brother blamed her father, who supposedly had influence over her. That same year, the Superior Court of Justice of Lima ordered the revocation of the arrest warrant against Giuliana, finding no responsibility for the convicted woman having transgressed rules of conduct. The resolution warned that the court in charge of the process did not issue any prior request to warn the convicted woman of noncompliance with the rules of conduct required of her, which was necessary. Luis accused his father, who has the same name, of having influence over the magistrate who made this decision because she was his close friend. Luis Llamoja Hilaires, brother of Giuliana Llamoja, was one of the protagonists of the story about the murder of Maria del Carmen Hilaires. In a press conference, he stated that her sister makes fun of justice and, therefore, asked her to surrender to justice. I would tell her to turn herself in so that her legal situation does not worsen further, the youngest of the Llamojas said at that time. When she regained her freedom, Giuliana Llamoja dedicated herself to poetry. She appeared on the missing program El Francotirador by journalist Jamie Bailey and gave a Bible to the show host, Magali Medina. She opened a poetry blog. The last one dates back to 2011. She sang at lawn tennis with Christian performer Jackie Velasquez and published the book Love and the Milky Way. In recent years he has maintained a low profile. She has been invited to several poetry festivals and, according to her LinkedIn, she is a criminal lawyer and is studying a master's degree in criminal law at the University of Freiburg, in Germany. On her Instagram account, which is open, she posts different photos of her daily life, her readings or the trips she took to different cities in Europe. She has a Facebook account and a YouTube channel. On her social networks, she also publishes photographs of her stay in the European country, where she lives. She was a fugitive from justice. She appeared on television programs. She dedicated a few years to literature and studied a master's degree in criminal law at the University of Freiburg. Although she keeps a low profile, she is very active on social media. When all these terrible events occurred, Giuliana was studying law, a career she finished after leaving prison. Currently, she is dedicated to writing poems. Leave us your comment and subscribe to continue growing, and follow us on our social networks, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram and TikTok.
Peru News Today. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.